So today, we're gonna take this beautiful bull, these shed antlers, and we're gonna put them on the wall as a gift in as close to their natural state as we can get them to go on the wall as a piece of art. So I bought this bracket. This bracket is designed to go on the top of a mannequin so that it has removable horns. So I'm just going to modify this piece because the concept is brilliant. You've got roughly a ball joint on a piece of steel square stock there, and then you have a piece of square tube that slides right over that. So I'm going to drill and epoxy this sleeve inside that horn, and then it will sit on here. That way I don't have to figure out exactly how to drill this perfectly, because I can swivel these till I get them just right. Then I'm going to lock it down.
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to take a look at a very long do-it-yourself shed horn mounting video. Now, first things first, you saw the bracket. You need to drill the horn large enough in order to fit the sleeve. In this case, I needed a bit that was 3/4 of an inch to fit that full sleeve inside there. So I drilled it right inside the base, and then I covered the outside of that steel tube and the inside of the hole with Van Dyke's 2-part epoxy and let it set. You'll see several times in the video where I used this bond-tight epoxy and hardener. It's just a very, very strong product. And as you're drilling your horns, just a little FYI, it's going to be a trip back in time to when the last time you got drilled on at the dentist. Not a great odor. I meant to mention that is a 50-50 epoxy, so half of the hardener, half of the resin. Put it in there, 24 hours, man, like a stone. Next thing, I fit the bracket on the table and I slide the horns on just to get a quick look and make sure everything's nice and solid.
Okay, I've got these horns mounted on this Van Dyke's large elk bracket, and I got it kind of where I want it. I got the look I'm looking for. The brows and bays are kind of at the angle I'm looking for. So this bull winds up being about 50 by 50 as is. Now the key is I want this to be as upright as possible against the wall. I don't want that elk head coming down. I want it up. So I literally want this back tine right here, his main beam, I want it to just almost touch the wall within about a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to take, and I didn't drill these deep enough, I don't know if you can tell or not, but I didn't drill these deep enough. I just didn't have a deep enough drill bit. So I'm going to cut these down a little bit and cut these down so that it sits right there. And I'll just walk you through the process. But this is a brand new thing for me. So bear with me. I've never done it on a bracket. I've always made my own. So I'll show you step by step how we do it from here.
So just to reiterate, this is a very, very innovative bracket. It's very well built. What you're looking at here is the bottom of the bracket, and you'll have a width dimension that you can play with. So the 2 Allens on the bottom will actually let you spread the horns if it had a big skull cap or less of a skull cap, but they fit nice and tight together, centered. So I put them there and torqued them. My best guess, that's the width of this bull. Next, I slide the horns back on the post, and then I double torque the Allens that hold that ball in place. And as I'm in the position, taking a visual look at it, I'm ready to move to the next step. I'm going to need to cut this bracket in order to make it fit for the application I'm using it for. So you heard me say in the beginning that I didn't insert the sleeves quite deep enough. I didn't have a long enough drill bit. So right now I'm going to cut those down just a hair so it's a little bit closer to the mount. I'm going to cut the post and the sleeve just to get them kind of positioned where I want them. Now, with my heights correct, I got to go back through the process of getting it to sit how I want it visually. There's a lot of adjustments that I found out that went into getting this just right. It's worth the time. Take a look at it from every angle. Really, really look at it, because at this point, it's your one shot to get this thing looking proper. Because this was built to go on top of a form mannequin upright, I'm not using this the way it was designed. The way I'm using this bracket is like this against the wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these sharp corners off, because if you envision this, I'm going to cover this in concrete and leather. So I don't want any high sides. And then I'm going to bolt a 4x4 here so I have something to screw to on the panel. Anyway, I'm going to knock off these edges quick with the bandsaw. Naturally, it goes without saying, but I want to reiterate, if you're doing this by yourself and maybe you haven't had a lot of experience with any tooling, make sure you get somebody there that can help you, or be very, very, very careful. So here's my theory. See how those overhang? I'm going to set them on a nice level piece with a back. I'm going to take that 4x4, tie it in this way, and tie it in this way. Now I have something I can form. Little by little, this thing's taking shape, and it's starting to gain a little familiarity for me. So I'm going to mount this to a piece of wood. As you can see here, I'm going to create a back plate, and then I'm going to create kind of a front plate. And what I'm doing is I'm giving myself something to screw into when I put it on the panel. I also am putting this on a wall versus putting it flat like it was designed. So as I got my pieces cut, I'm just going to screw it all together. I'm going to mount it back on an upright piece, put the horns on it, make sure everything looks okay, and then I'm just going to epoxy the entire thing. I'm going to fill in the places where I put Allen screws. I'm just going to make it to where it physically can't move ever again. This is a big risk, but it's also important, I believe more important, that it doesn't flex or bend. It's nice and solid. This is going in a family member's home, and I really want this thing to be solid and well built. I'm going to take a minute and sand off all the high sides, any of the loose cut marks and all that stuff. Just get it blended so when the epoxy goes on, there's nothing to hang up on. Okay, last piece. So we made essentially our wall bracket. This is what we're going to form, but it gives us something to screw to. So what I want to do is lay it flat. See if the horns clear this. Picture this is your wall, right? So if the tips of the horns don't touch the wall, I'm good to go. That way when everything goes upright, I can put it on hanger and big beautiful display. So I got to make an adjustment. This horn is clear. That horn, it tips back further. And although I have it visually correct here, this needs to come down. So I got to make that adjustment. That's how it should look on the wall. Okay, man, I am 100% happy with the shape and look and everything. So I'm going to go ahead, mix another batch of that tight bond up. I'm going to cover every inch of this in epoxy. I'm going to make it one big solid piece like it was designed for this exact thing. 24 hours of dry time, I'm ready to roll. That epoxy will also help that wood from ever splitting when I run a screw into the back of it. Next step, I mount the bracket itself to a separate board. This will kind of act as a panel, and it will allow me to shape the mortar against a solid surface. Before I mix my concrete, I like to take a little aluminum foil or plastic wrap or something and wrap the base of the horn. This is just an experience thing. When you start shaping concrete around there, you have a tendency to get some on the horn or the base of the pedicle or something. This will just make it a lot easier cleanup. Okay, moving on. I have a small background in the plumbing trade, and we used to sell a product called dynamite. It was 50% concrete, 50% plaster of Paris, and I used to shape horns with it. I don't think it's still available, but that's my mix. Regular concrete, plaster of Paris, half and half. I take a pretty good amount of it. You're just going to have to play it by ear. I used 4 scoops of each. I mix it with water till I get the consistency right, and then get right with it. Plaster of Paris sets really fast. A couple of ways you can slow it down: use cold water or use more water. But you're going to develop your own shape and your own style. I just plop that mud on, press it around. You really want to press it into all those areas and voids and things like that. And as it's happening, you start shaping. I use just a regular old kitchen knife that I've used for years, and I kind of slide and cut. And you want to just take and use your own visual referencing to where you can look at it and go, that looks good for me, or that side is too heavy. Just use your own. There's no kit. This is completely one-off, hand done. Just shape, shape, shape. And as you go through it, if you have a place that needs more mud, just come back and put that on later. To me, this is a experience thing. It'll just become easier as you do more. Some people are just naturally great shapers, and this will be no big deal. Now, this has been the part I've been worried about from the beginning. I want to make it so the horns are removable, but I've kind of concreted them in there. Not too bad, but I got to break that free and get these horns off before it completely sets. And I don't want to torque. This is going to be the hard one, so I'm going to start here. Look at that. Not so sweet. From here, I just unscrew it from the back panel and I just let it sit, let it dry. I almost always have little chips or something that'll break off one of the thinner sections where it rounds the side. It's okay. I patch all that stuff up later. Again, this mortar right here is just giving me kind of a foundation shape. That's all this is. Okay, so I know I said it, but this removable horn mount is a bit of a learning process for me. I've done hundreds and hundreds of fixed mounts, but I've never done one on a removable set of horns. So when I popped it off, I lost this. So I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to smooth this nice and round on both sides. Y'all, we are getting somewhere. So now I take a little Dremel and I make kind of a little indentation around that square stock so that my square tube can kind of slide down in it. And then I realize after I put the horns on and take a good look at it that I'd like to have those posts cut down just a little bit more. I cut them at an angle, but I wanted them square. So I go ahead and cut them down, and they're at the perfect height. Last little bit of shaping here. I'm going to wrap that post with a little bit of wax paper because I'm going to build up that section from our form to the base of the horn to give it a nice seat, just like it would look on the skull cap of that animal. Once I've got it wrapped up, so I know that I can pull the horn off nice and easy, I mix up a little Fix-It Sculpt by Van Dyke's. This is a product you ought to have on the shelf for any project. It's unbelievable. It's 2 parts. You mix them together 50-50, knead them around, and then it's like a clay that will harden. I just form it around that horn, put it right up against the base, so now that horn has a nice, beautiful seat. Make sure you kind of work it hard up against that wax paper so that it makes a nice contact point around that square tube. We're looking for a really secure on and off horn mount here. Take it off, let it dry 24 hours, hard as a rock. Another really good trick is you can take any sort of cleaning product like Windex or 409 and you can spray it on that stuff as it's curing, and you can really smooth it down and get it to blend really, really nice. After it's dry, you can just remove that little wax paper that we put in there. You have a perfect little collar sleeve for that to go in, and then the Armstrong piece works. So from now we got to kind of fine tune our form. You got to take and file the high sides, make sure we patch any of this holes or just really go through it. I use a file to start, sandpaper second. Once I got it pretty close, I mix up a batch of Bondo. I coat the whole thing so I got a nice sandable layer. Now I know you're thinking, my goodness, how many things do I have to buy to do this? Anything that would work as an alternative, use. This is, again, just a general rule of thumb. Doesn't have to be the exact products. If you got something in the house, use it. All right, I promise this is the last time you have to sand. Once it's dry, I just take the sander and I just go over that thing good as can be. So we're going to stretch leather over this. So if there's any sort of dimples or high sides, it's going to be real exaggerated. Like painting a wall. If there's something on that wall, and just because you covered it in paint doesn't mean everybody's not going to see it. It's really not much different. So we're looking to get rid of the irregularities or the stuff that may create kind of an eyesore. All right, I'm going to try and build the panel before I stretch the leather. My brother was looking for some grays and some barnwood, and I found this old whatever floating on the lake, and I kept it for just such a project. I'm going to cut the hardware off it, and I'm just going to try and get all the boards individualized. I'm looking for something kind of irregular. This is just 2x4 construction, a bunch of old rusted carriage bolts. I take it all apart, and I want to kind of stagger them together, just kind of lay everything in place and give it kind of a unique backdrop. No real pattern. It takes a little looking about 4 or 5 times to kind of get my head around what I want to see, but I wind up using all but one board. There was one board in the mix that was a funny color and it just didn't work right. So I got it laid out, I turned it upside down, and I'm going to put just a 1/2 inch piece of lumber on the back in order to secure everything in place because I don't want to see any hardware except for the original. This is also going to go on a stairwell where you're going to come up and see it from the front, but if you come in another door, you're going to see it from the side. So what I can't have is a new raw wood edge on the back because you'll see it. So I'm going to take some of the leather that I'm going to stretch over the crown, and I'm going to do the sides of the board in the back. So when you walk in the room, you'll see natural barnwood. And if you do see behind the panel, for whatever reason, you're going to see a perfect leather seam in the back there. Now I'm just going to screw everything together from behind, and then I need to put a double hanger system on it so it can't swing right or left. You know, we're probably going to have 60 pounds of horn and concrete and bone and panel. So I'm going to put a hanger at the top and a hanger at the bottom, nice and secure. Next, I want to fill the holes with the original hardware. So I'm going to take and cut the carriage bolts down so they'll just fit in the hole. And I'm going to take just a little tiny bit of Gorilla Glue and glue them right in place. Back panel, finito. All right, let's take our crown and stretch our leather. I use spray adhesive for original contact, meaning for the very first layer, I use spray adhesive. Any place that I got to really stretch, I'm going to use hot glue. So spray it good. Remember, if you get this spray in your hands and then touch the finished leather, you're now going to have a glue mark stain something. You really want to be cognizant of where your hands go and what you're doing. Spray adhesive is kind of a pain that way. So I've cut my leather as you saw, I lay it on top, and then I take the most difficult places to stretch around what would be the pedicle of that crown. And I stretch the leather nice and tight, pull, tug, pull, tug. Don't ever get panicky. Deer leather, this is deer leather in gray, I bought from the leather guy, and it will stretch a country mile. It's amazing what you can get away with. So I just continue to stretch, and when I start to wrap around the back, I like to use hot glue to kind of hold those places nice and tight. If you gotta move and go to a clean area because you're not sure what's on the table, do that, or spray and stretch, then put a towel down, roll it around. Don't be afraid. You really don't want to get something on this, or you're going to have to tear it off and start over. Things are starting to get exciting. The closer I get to finishing a project, man, the more fired up I get. So in order to affix our crown to the panel, naturally we're going to drill a couple of holes and then run screws up from the back into the panel. So I do exactly that. And of course, I put the very first screw right through my hanger. But no worries, it was free and clear. On a completely different side note, this is a fantastic way to represent an animal that's still on the hoof as a trophy. Every day I get some sort of angry somebody who doesn't like what I do. So here's a video you might understand. This animal is still alive and well, and I'm going to respect him the exact same way I would respect an animal that I harvested personally by putting him up on the wall and paying my dues. Thanks for always watching. Thank you for the support. I hope this helps you if you're wanting to mount some sheds. Till next time, thanks for watching.